Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
This gentleman is your parental lifeline. If you're having some challenges with your children, don't know where to turn, he would be it. And interestingly, he spent decades as a school psychologist, has seen it all, worked with children, got them through many challenges and parents as well. Spent a lot of years at Reed Union School District in California. And he's back with us. Lots to talk about today. Good Advice Helps with Dr. Allan Gold on the program. How are you doing today?
Okay, thank you. How are you?
Very well, very well. I also want to share, if you've got questions, comments, need some insight, instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. We'll get to some of your emails in a moment. We're going to do what we call What's Going On Here? What's going on here? Hypothetical situation. Probably not uncommon with things that parents have dealt with along the way. And let's see if we could dissect and see what's going on here. So we'll call this Suddenly Afraid of Everything. A 9-year-old used to be adventurous, sleepovers, school trips, sports, always into everything, no issues at all, and recently has become very anxious. They refuse to sleep alone, won't go to birthday parties. They'll complain of stomach aches before school. There's nothing wrong medically. They went to the doctor. Nothing obvious has changed at home. And the child can't really explain why they're anxious, why they're scared. Just that they feel bad things might happen. That's been the verbalization from the 9-year-old. What's going on here? What are you thinking?
Well, it's very disturbing when that happens, and it has happened in my career. Obviously, what you want to do is try to figure out what happened, because when something is sudden like that, if a child has always been comfortable trying out new things or going places to parties and whatever, and all of a sudden is totally anxious, some trauma has happened. You have to believe that. Whether it was to the child, him or herself, or he or she made some observation of something awful happening to another kid, or was exposed to some news that was very frightening. It could be any of those things. For example, say there was a plane crash, and kids are not as they don't have the perspective that adults do. Yes, we're aware that planes crash, but it's a very, very rare event. But for something that hits the news in a big way, that could be really, really scary for a kid who wouldn't want to go on a plane. If there's a robbery in the neighborhood, if somebody's hurt in the neighborhood, if there's a shooting in the neighborhood. And certainly we see that now in current events, with all the ICE taking over, capturing people, trapping people, going in their houses, going into schools and malls. People are legitimately afraid that their life is at risk. And so depending on how old the kid is and how aware they are of what's going on in the world or in their neighborhood, they can get scared. If nothing happened at home, that's a good thing, but you don't always know. I had a situation once a few years ago where a child was on a plane, I believe, and threw up. And that child did not want to leave the home, didn't want to go to school. He sort of expanded his fear that, this is going to happen again. I don't want to throw up at school. I'm going to be embarrassed. So that was a traumatic event for him. And it took really some time for him to feel comfortable enough.
The world events, there's so much going on. As an adult, a parent, we pretty much become immune to it in some regards. Like, there's another one going on there, another situation, whatever it is. Not going deep into that. Yeah. certainly COVID. I got to believe that that was probably what this 9-year old is experiencing. Really, really kicked things up for a lot of kids.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
How do you start that communication? If you're thinking, all right, nothing has changed here at home, nothing at school, child is saying they can't explain why they're scared, but they feel that bad things might happen. They have to have been influenced by something around them.
Yeah.
How do you start that dialogue without going into detail? You can certainly think back in the last week. All right, what was in the news? All right, we had that confrontation. That person maybe got shot. Maybe there was a major accident in your city, and that got a lot of press. Without going into different situations, Jimmy, was it this? You don't want to go there because you don't want to stir the pot. But how do you start that communication with your child, Alan? If you suspect it might be world events.
Yeah. It's tough because you don't know how willing the child is to talk about it. But I think I would start in saying, "Gee, I understand you're really afraid of these things. What do you think could happen?" Try to see what get them to verbalize what they're afraid of. And I would ask, what do you think would make you safer? Now we're here to protect you, when you're home, you're safe, but when you go to school, I would explain what school has to protect their kids. Um, it's really hard. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, and we had um, drills for what if there were a hydrogen bomb that were dropped. This
Oh,
was
you know what?
in the
Yes, you're.
50s.
How about when there used to be whoop, that sound would come out of the speaker that the clock was attached to in your
Yeah,
classroom, and you would go into the hallway and hands over the head in the corner or underneath your desk or whatever it is. I totally forgot about that. How
yeah.
traumatic that must have been for us kids then.
Yeah, and in San Francisco, we always had earthquake drills too, because you never know if that was
Jeez.
going to happen. So, I think every kid is a little bit different about it. Some kids just dismiss that stuff and, write it off and don't get upset by it. But the real sensitive kids can be deeply affected by those things. There's a disease that's called PANS. And I learned about it maybe 10 years ago. And it's caused by strep throat. And it creates a tremendous amount of anxiety in a victim of that.
Wow.
Uh, so I had a fifth grade girl who had it, and she really didn't want to go to school. So her mom or dad used to accompany her. I met with her once a week, and eventually, she was taking all kinds of medications for it, and eventually it subsided and got better. But you said in the beginning that there was no medical problem, but there are medical issues like that
Jeez.
create a tremendous amount of anxiety, and we would work on that, and the mom would sit at the back of the class, and the girl would just feel better. When she went to middle school, it got better, but she would sometimes have episodes that would arise, based on that same illness. So, even with um, when kids are just afraid to come to school, particularly it's called school phobia. They're afraid of school. When they're like starting kindergarten, or we've done where parents would come and sit with them, or gradually take baby steps to put the child on his or her own independence. But starting, the mom or dad would sit in the classroom and then maybe just drop the kid off, and then, gradually get to that place where he or she could adapt. So,
Mm.
there are different possible solutions. But dealing with child anxiety, and the other possibility eventually is outside therapy. and some anti-anxiety medication. But it's really important to try to figure out is what the kid was afraid of, what would make him or her feel safer, uh,
Mm.
and a lot of reassurance that everybody's here to take care of you. Now, I could certainly imagine that, the school shootings that we've read about, I can certainly imagine, and it's logical. Why would a kid want to go to school? What if that's going to happen again? Like Sandy Hook or the one in Texas. And I mean, those are horrible, horrible, traumatic events for kids, and particularly if a friend is killed, you know, they've got to be afraid. And, they
Wish,
may.
and those might be the ones that are like staring you in the face. But you just brought back a memory for me as an adult that I started getting anxiety. I'm like, what? I'm like worrying, anxious about things. Like, what the heck is going on? Come to figure out that it turned out that I had a low level ulcer,
Oh,
gastro issues.
yeah.
And I would get these like butterflies and feelings like, and we all have them. Like you have to do anything that you're not, crazy about doing. On the average side, I'll go do it. This was like, oh, I got to go do that, and it doesn't matter what it is, conversation with somebody that, could be a little dicey. And then I would start to feel those things in my stomach. I'm like, what is going on? And then it got worse and worse and worse. Then now at the point, well, something's not right here. Turned out to be an ulcer. But my point here is there might not be any signs of any issues with the child, but maybe some gastro issues too, where
Yeah.
they feel something. They can't verbalize it. I was an adult and I wasn't figuring it out at the
Yeah.
beginning. So little things like that could be presenting and we might not even see it. And especially from a child who is adventurous or was with sleepovers, sports, shows up there for a party, school trips and things like that. And a reverse, something must have happened.
Yeah, so I mean, and particularly with those social events, it didn't
Mm.
necessarily have to be something at a crisis level, but what if the kid went to a party and people made fun of him, or he wet his pants, or or
Mm.
something really embarrassing happened. He was rejected, he lost a game. Like I said, there is a wide range um, of receptivity to difficult situations. Some kids, particularly it also, and I've said this before, has a lot to do with self-esteem. If it's an outside thing that you have no control over, like a school shooting, um, well, who knows? A kid may feel bad about himself and think, "Oh, they're going to come after me
Mm.
next time." But in general, I would say if a kid feels okay about him or herself, and it's an outside event like that, the anxiety is very normal. But if a kid has low self-esteem and blows a sports game, or something happens at a party that I mean, I remember when we talk, I think of event when I was in the eighth grade. Um, I was at a house party and we did a lot of those, and I I won some game. I won like a football tee, and my best friend then said, "You're not athletic. What do you need that for?" And, and I could have been really wiped out. I could have been, very embarrassed. And he said that sort of publicly. It's
Mm.
true. I wasn't athletic and I didn't play football. I didn't need what I
Me
won.
either. I get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, but fortunately, I had enough self-esteem that I didn't yell back and I didn't say anything. But obviously, this is how many years later? 67 years later, I still remember it. Um,
Isn't it amazing when you look back to your childhood? And it's a classic question people ask, and we probably think it ourselves. If you could go back then, knowing what you know now, what you would want to tell your younger self, oh my gosh, I would be having a conversation for a long time.
yeah.
But you don't know until you live a life.
I had another event when I was in the sixth grade. We played kickball, our class, and I wasn't I had skipped a grade, so I was a year younger. And like I said, I wasn't particularly athletic. And I remember when it was my turn to kick, everybody would move in, it's because I wouldn't kick the ball that far out. But one day, my teacher asked if I wanted somebody to substitute for me to kick. And I
Mm,
remember um, very well. My mouth was like this. I was struggling not to cry.
ooh,
Uh, it's like that. And, the teacher didn't mean badly, I don't think. She was trying to um, save me from embarrassment. But no, I kicked it anyway. But
mm,
so we remember those things. But depending on how your overall self-esteem is, you can either weather those things. Now, I could have felt anxiety for every time we played anything. Um, but I didn't. I don't remember doing that. It was one event, and I didn't stop going to house parties and and
mm.
all that stuff.
Isn't it amazing what floods back to you? Like as soon as I'm getting like flashes. I remember Richie Competenti's birthday party at Adventureland. For a kid, it's an amusement park, great place ever. And I was like, oh, and my mom was busy or working or something like that. So I needed to get a ride with the other kids. And I was anxious as a child too. And I'm like, wow, they're going to pick me up. What if this, what if that? Turned out fantastic. But, even when it was time to drop me off, oh, mom's not home. Well, now I'm alone.
Yeah, right, right. So it's not unusual that kids feel anxiety about
Yeah,
a variety of things. Like I said, it's important to try to deconstruct it and figure out what triggered that, particularly if it's a sudden change. Um,
sure.
and then if it doesn't go away, if they're even in little baby steps, if they can't ease the child's anxiety, then therapy and possible anti-anxiety medication would be an important thing. So, see a psychiatrist about it. But I can't remember any kids that experienced that and then wasn't eventually able to work it through.
Mm. So we identified we had challenges as children. Most of us, if not all of us, did. I want to flip it for just a moment. Do
Sure.
you remember that moment where you felt like you've got some self esteem? An event, something that might have happened in school that gave you wings, gave you that feeling of, oh, all right, you know what? I'm good at this, or they like me, or they asked me to do something. I mean, certainly the kickball thing, but you weren't ready for that at that time.
No.
Is there one thing that kind of elevated your self esteem more than anything else? That the first time that you really, wow, okay,
Yeah, I think when I was in first grade and I had learned to read and I was reading well, um, there was a kid in my class, I don't even remember who it was now, who needed some help with reading and I offered to help. And whether I was conscious, I don't think I was conscious, but just the fact that, and I haven't thought about this for a long time, but just the fact that I was able to feel confident enough that I was a good reader and I could offer my skills to help somebody else. That was one of my earliest um,
mm,
but I mean, there were other things even when I was little that I remember now. For example, when I was 3 years old, um, well, even even younger, I'll tell you two little stories. When I was 2 years and 9 months old, I had my tonsils out, and the at the time they used ether masks, these black masks. And the doctor told me if you can count backward from 100 down to zero, it will blow up this balloon and we'll give it to your parents and you can get it after you're out of the
mm,
surgery. So who's going to ask a two and a half year old to count backward from 100? But I could. I was
Whoa.
always good in I probably got to 99. So then when I got to after the surgery and I asked my parents, so where's the black balloon? And they said, what are you talking about? And I remembered that because they didn't hear it. I also sort of, for the first time, didn't think that doctors were always trustworthy, but that's a different story. The
Yeah, many
other,
many adults feel the same way. But anyway,
so I've always been good at math. And then the other thing that when I was 3, we were driving to Yosemite and Yosemite Park. I don't know if you've been there, National Park. It's a beautiful place. We used to go
mm,
there every summer. Um, and I don't know if you know what El Capitan is, but it's this huge mountain that's all vertical. It's all flat and very tall. And I remember when we drove past it, I said, wow, that's slabbergasting now instead of flabbergasting. So here I was at 3 years old and I was making my first pun uh, of a word. So looking back at those things, I looked at myself as, hey, you were pretty exceptional,
wow.
to be able to count backward from 100 and to be able to make a funny pun. And I still love making funny
But the
puns.
fact that you had the awareness to know that not every kid can count back at that age, back
Yeah.
from 100 and all of that, big check marks there to have that, embrace that,
Yeah.
and realize it. I think it was for me, fifth grade, and I got bullied and like, a lot of the same stuff and more, if you asked me to kick that ball and I would have same exact thing. I'd be like, after never being picked for kickball, I was the big fat pudgy kid. And fifth grade, Mr. Eaton, we had a class newspaper, and he made me the editor of the class newspaper. And I always loved drawing cartoons and all of that. And that was whoa, all right. And it was me and Mike Harrison. We worked together on it. And he actually became a journalist for many
Oh,
newspapers. Moving forward, I almost became a syndicated cartoonist at 22. That close, but I was already doing radio. But it was that moment where it was just like, all right, I feel okay about myself. I have a role, I have a purpose here.
yeah.
Um, and I went back years later and thanked Mr. Eaton for that, and actually spoke in his class. He was still teaching like years later, and just explained, what that was like and what class was like and everything. Because you don't know if when you're a kid, you don't, you only have this vision. You don't see the big picture that's ahead of you.
Well, when I was 10, I remember saying, I think to my parents, I have an inferiority superiority complex because I knew I was really, really good at school.
Mm.
And even though I was sometimes bullied, people recognize, other kids recognize that I was a really good student. But I also knew I wasn't an athlete. So my superiority complex was in my academics, and my inferiority was, with athletics. But so I labeled myself that way, which at 10 was also, a
Yeah. Even to
bit
use
of,
those words. Come
yeah, I
on.
know. I know.
All right, let's go to some emails here. Instant feedback, Steve at gmail.com. Rob in Seattle says, I appreciate your conversation about children. From your perspective, how has screens, social media, and constant digital stimulation changed children's emotional development? I'm dealing with this now. Are there challenges you're seeing now that didn't really exist a decade or so ago?
Absolutely. Yes, I've talked about this before. Yeah.
Mm.
I've seen much increase in anxiety and depression among and addiction. I think it's very, very dangerous, and that's one of the most difficult aspects of parenting these days. So I won't say just 10 years ago. I'd say it's heading towards 15 or 20 now,
Mm.
where, kids are just stuck on their phones or their electronic devices. Social media. has its very strong impact because of kids, particularly girls, don't get enough likes.
Oh,
If they look at their self-esteem can really be damaged. And,
brutal.
that, and that's not even counting the negative postings that kids will put on, Instagram or text each other, and it's really damaged communication. They don't know how to. Well, I won't say they don't know how to, but they when they text each other or post things, they don't see the nonverbal facial expressions. They don't know the effect that their words are having on other kids. And we know that kids have even committed suicide because of how badly they feel due to either lack of response to them or mean responses to them on social media. So it really has changed. That and schools really have to be very well aware of how kids are addicted to this. Most schools now, I think, give their kids laptops or iPads
Yeah.
to do work. And kids are they're sneaky and smart, and they can play games, they can communicate with each other and look like they're working. Um, some teachers, many more teachers now, I think, are having kids put their smartphones in a little on a wall container or something, pockets.
That was this school year. So
Yeah.
many schools across the country. I know certainly in my area, suburb of New York City. That's it. There's no devices, and
Yeah.
we know it's good. There's a little bit of mixed feeling there in case of emergency situations, but you know we
And
didn't need them
no, we didn't
20 years
need
ago
that.
and back.
No, no. And then with AI, now professors and teachers are uncertain whether kids are just referring to AI to write essays. And so I've heard that more and more professors and teachers are giving kids blue books. That's what we had. They were these blue books that you wrote an essay in class. So, because we didn't have the electronic devices to do that.
Yeah.
So, but from a parent point of view, I think the monitoring of the child is challenging but necessary. So I think, and when you present little kids, because parents will use iPads as babysitters when kids are 2 or 3. They won't be doing anything awful. They'll just be playing games or watching cartoons or something like that.
Mm.
But it also sets them up that you are attached to your electronic device. And we all know that they're not going to go away, but yeah, it's really important to watch to see that kids can control themselves and give it up when they have to. And parents should really encourage kids to be social, to get out and do, um, extracurricular activities or be with friends, and not just play on the computer.
You just the things that we don't think of was or is this is an addiction. We're talking about an addiction to a device. If you went back before phones, was there anything like that? I'm scanning my brain. Anything that we needed to worry about in terms of our kids, in terms of, that class where the kid might be, messing around on his phone or whatever. The worst we ever did, not that we were angels, but, it was passing notes. Or I remember we used to
Yeah.
write a note and then fold it in a certain way. So then you could, off the desk to a friend. It was almost like getting mail. You've got mail. It was almost like getting mail in a way. Um,
Yeah.
but it wasn't addictive. Now with these devices, I think a lot of us as parents, we forget your kid has an addiction. Face it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's very important, I've said over and over again, to check, if you have time limits, whether, parents will say, no, you're not on the computer on a school night. Or you can be on for half an hour, or on the weekend, maybe an hour or two or something. But then it's really informative if you give the kid a 5-minute warning and they say, oh, let me just finish this one part of the game and then I'll get off. And if they do within 2 or 3 minutes, that's reassuring that they do
Mm,
have some self-control. But if that, oh wait, I'm not finished yet, give me another 10 minutes, and then at 10 minutes becomes a half an hour. Mom, leave me alone. I want to finish this game. Then you know that there's addiction. And that's where I mean, there are therapists that deal with electronic addiction. And it's really, really hard. I don't think it's any different than smoking or drinking or
mm-hmm.
other addictions,
Do you think as parents, when that happens, and your kid is, I don't know, 9, whatever, and you ask them to get off, and like, no, mom, I'm just playing. Let me get out of this game. I got a couple more minutes. We don't see it as addiction. We just see it as my son, my daughter, they're just having fun. And I know I'm taking away their fun, but yeah, I'll give them a couple more minutes. You don't want them to not have fun and not be happy because they seem happy. Do you think that we're kind of forgetting that they're addicted or in
I
denial?
yeah, I think so.
Mm,
You know,
me too.
as parents, I've talked about parents as consultants and parents as managers, but certainly around this, we as parents still have the right to be managers and to try to redirect them. I mean, we didn't, what did we grow up with? I built not Legos, but American bricks or Tinker toys or,
Hmm.
I built things, I drew things, I read, I played outside with kids. I had plenty of fun without any electronic devices. Now, I'm not saying that electronic devices should disappear. They're good for answering questions and finding out new information and news and all that sort of stuff. And watching movies. I mean, I don't like to watch movies on my telephone. It's too small. But and
You know
when
what? We're old because I don't do it either. I'm
yeah,
bored. When I'm
yeah,
watching, I got a big screen TV. Why the
yeah,
blank
right.
do I want to waste my TV time, which is limited? So, when I'm making an
I mean,
experience.
you were mentioning when we were kids, what were we addicted to? I suppose it could be possible to be addicted to television. Um,
Sure. Yes. Okay. You know what? Didn't even think about that. Even when
yeah,
we were kids, there could have been addiction to TV, but I don't know why, and I could be wrong. I don't know why I see it in a different way, where you could get your kid away from the TV. Maybe it might take, 2 attempts or whatever, but I never saw it, even my kids, my oldest is 30, my youngest is 17. I never saw, you know, a fight with the TV. It was like, all
yeah,
right, I'll get back to it later. It's interesting when you look at it that way, but when it's a device or a video game, there's a fight that ensues. There's a confrontation. And I also believe, a lot of parents now don't give their kids the attention that they know they should because they can't. They're working multiple jobs.
that's right,
And then
exactly.
there's guilt that comes in. And then there's also that, well, I didn't have that when I was growing up. I want to give that to my kids. I want them to have that experience. Doesn't mean it's always the right thing.
But I think it's just really important to be aware of the negative effects, you know,
Yeah.
uh, and because if you don't, if you're in denial as a parent and don't realize what it does to social, and I mean, they're talking more and more about this generation, the Gen Z or A or whatever they're calling they're very isolated,
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
and I mean, talking about television, it's also older people, are maybe stuck at home, and what do they do all day? They want, they're retired and they watch television 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's no better, you know,
Or they're on their devices.
or
Same exact
they're on
thing.
their devices. Yeah. So, and I think the effects of all of this is what we're seeing in the country with the polarization, that people are not really communicating with each other.
Isn't
Uh,
it interesting, Alan, when you think of it that way? The smartphone, it is a communication device. You can make phone calls, you can text, you can post, you can reply. It's really designed for communication. But with all of this, everything social media, there is less communication now.
yeah, yeah.
Ridiculous.
Because communication, is really designed to be, face to face. If
Ultimate. Yeah.
somebody doesn't understand what you're saying, they can ask questions, they can clarify. But that's very hard to do when you're texting. I mean, I'm not saying that we should get rid of electronic devices. I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm going to be late someplace, I can text the person or telephone them and say, sorry, the traffic is really bad. I'm going to be late. It's a very convenient way of communicating. Or,
Sure.
particularly like if I'm going someplace new, I can use GPS on the phone and it gets transferred to the car. There's very useful things. Or when I'm having a conversation with somebody at my age, I hate to admit it, but I might forget somebody's name. Not a person, but like an actor, an actress, or a movie,
Hmm.
or I want to know how old somebody is, and I can just Google it fast and find out the answer. So it is very useful, to but parents particularly when kids are just stuck playing games all the time,
Yeah.
uh, and they're not getting any physical
Well, there's the other part of it. Yeah.
exercise too. Yeah.
The gentleman who passed in the last year or so, who invented this thing called texting, I think he passed like 95 years old. He invented it back in the 70s, where
Hmm.
it was designed for short communication, and that it was a different time then. Then there was just email was just emerging. Nobody even knew what that was until the
The
late 80s
80s
and
or
such.
something. Yeah.
But that turned into the beeper. Remember the beeper? And it was just what you said. I'm going to be 5 minutes late. Send. You didn't have, the means to type a lot. It was just quick, short communication. And then that turned into the BlackBerry, then the cell phone and all of that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But we use it as our only mode of communication where it's the way it was then. It's supposed to be just quick things. That's it. That's not made to have conversations, confrontation, and all that. I want to go to a listener question.
Sure.
I'm going to say personally, this is a good question for you. Marcus, Atlanta. He says, I am reevaluating my career goals. What originally pulled you toward child psychology instead of working with adults? And was there a moment early in your career when you realized this work was exactly what you were meant to do?
Okay. Um, well, I guess I always wanted to be a teacher or professor, and I always liked teaching other people. Now, whether it was kids or adult, like when I was in graduate school, because in school psychology, I had originally was going to be a statistics professor, but I changed careers
Well,
for
you were good in math, so no surprise there.
yeah, that was another whole story about. But I was a teaching assistant for the statistics professor, so I was teaching, adult students, and I liked that. Um, but like I said earlier, from when I was in first grade, I wanted to help out another student, another, peer. So I've always been interested working with kids and a whole range of kids. So why didn't I want to do? I mean, now as I've gotten older, um, I I'm still in contact with some of my former students who are adults, or there are adults, that um, if they want some help dealing with situations, I'm happy to do that. But I guess it was just built into me that you know, felt that I wanted to help kids grow and develop. Uh,
Mm. Mm.
uh, having that. experience myself about, my own roller coaster of uh, that. I guess another thing that I appreciated about kids, I felt that there was a chance to change them, for the positive. Once you're an adult, it gets harder and harder to change. You really have to want to do that as an adult.
Mm,
Uh, sometimes, but years of habits and I'm not just saying addiction, but just, habits that you have, are really difficult to change. And I think the challenge for um, therapists for, marriage and family therapists and so on, to really work with, an adult to change his or her behaviors or actions so that the
mm.
marriage is better. Those are very challenging, but I've always felt with kids, they're all in a developmental stage, and there's I think a greater probability that you can actually make a difference. Um,
Do you think a part of you, from some of the things that you identified, which a lot of us have gone through and kids do today, maybe the bullying and things like that, do you think that that was also a part of why you went into supporting children with psychology?
I don't think it was necessarily the reason in the beginning, but it didn't take very long for me to talk to other kids to relate them to their experiences to my own history.
Mm,
So I certainly, when I met kids or worked with kids who were experiencing things like bullying or even the opposite of what I had, because I said I was always a really good student, but when kids were struggling with academics, I did relate to it because there were, classes or times when something was hard for me, and I remembered that. And what did I do to learn the skill? Um,
mm.
so yeah, it wasn't just things that happened to me, but um, yeah, I felt like I could contribute to they're making progress and solving the problem. Because, yeah, I mean, we all have problems that we have to solve. And, it's the bigger picture of, okay, how do I get through this situation? What can I do to resolve this
Mm.
issue or build this skill?
So, question here, and this is an interesting one. Priya in San Jose.
Oh,
And
not too
what's
far.
what's up, California?
Yeah.
And by the way, instant feedback, Steve at gmail.com. We're here. Have any questions, whether it's about children or career? My child often says things that aren't true, blaming siblings, insisting something happened when it didn't. We're worried about dishonesty, but punishment doesn't seem to help. How do psychologists look at lying in kids, and what might it actually be communicating?
Okay. That's
Hmm.
that's a hard one.
But
Um,
not uncommon, because I
no,
remember
it's not uncommon.
there was a period of one of my kids, I won't say
Yeah.
which one, um, there was some fabrication from time to time. And it ended, a couple of years later as they get older. But I wonder what's actually going on there. Why, the truth
Well,
is not there.
why do we all lie? We lie because we're afraid of the consequences if we tell the truth.
Fair enough.
Yes. So if a kid lies, he or she is probably afraid if I tell the truth, I'm going to get really in trouble. My parents are going to hate me, or I'm going to, they'll take away my computer, or um, so, and that's not unusual for kids to lie. They learn fairly young. I can't say exactly when the first lie happens, but you
Mm,
know, could be 4 or 5 years old. Um, so I think what the again, it's all about communication. How do parents respond to that? you know, so, little boy, I observe this. I know you're not telling the truth about this. Um, and it's really important that I build trust in you as a parent. And let me know what you're afraid of, that if you tell the truth, what's going to happen. Okay. Um, what do you think the consequences would be if if you told the truth? And again, it's very difficult. Kids will be angry with their siblings and they'll want to blame them for something. I've seen that tons of times. Oh, well, he started it or she started it. Um, and I think it's, the bigger picture is to have a discussion about trust because, when people lie, we don't trust them. And so, why do you think, I would say, why do you think it's important that I trust you or that your mom and dad trust you? And see
Hmm.
if, a 5-year-old probably wouldn't be able to answer that, but a 9 or 10-year-old probably would. And if they can't answer, I'd say, I'll tell you why it's important. Because the older you get, the more you're going to ask for permission or you're going to want to do something. And if I trust that you'll handle that well, if I trust that you'll let me know if something is difficult, if I trust that you're not going to lead somebody else down the wrong path,
Hmm.
then I'm much more inclined to say, yeah, give it a try. But if you're not telling me the truth, then I'm not going to feel comfortable, um, you know, letting you act independently. And the older you get, the more you're going to want to do things on your own. And I appreciate that. That's a normal thing. I want you to be able to do that. But if you lie to your teacher, if you lie to friends, what do you think they're going to think about you? So there's no easy answer to that. It's a
Hmm.
process, and it's also important, I think, for parents to have these discussions, not in the moment of some being caught. I think it's good to have a family discussion about some of these issues when it's kind of peace and quiet. I've recommended that families have like weekly family sessions where like on a
Yeah.
weekend, and they just talk about
Oh, you mean the classic Sunday dinner?
yeah, the Sunday dinner. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, no, it's a very, very good question, and it's hard to deal with kids who are lying. And now you're gonna disagree with me, but I actually saw what happened and I heard what happened. So I'm not going to punish you. I'm not, but I want you to work on this so that you don't feel you have to lie.
Hmm.
And the more you catch yourself and say, Mom, I really lied about that. I was the one that broke the vase, or whatever it happens to be.
Hmm.
Uh, and then, kids are obviously, when they're teenagers, they're definitely going to lie. Oh, I didn't smoke any weed at this party, or I didn't drink anything. But that's why constant communication from the time a kid is really little. So if the kid grows up feeling that they trust their parents and they're not going to whip them or swear at them or those kind of or really punish them, sometimes there has to be consequences, but it doesn't have to be totally hurtful.
Got literally a minute, and I
Oh,
want to
that's
get
all?
a couple, like two.
Okay.
um, golden tools that you can use tonight with your children. What can you give us?
Okay. I mentioned last time about communication. I
Sure.
think I think a golden tool for parents is being a really good role model for the kind of kids they want their kids to grow up as. And what
Mm.
that's a very general term, but parents are role models. Kids will act the way they see their parents acting. Even if a parent says one thing, kids are very observant and very sensitive, and they will do what their parents do. For example, say a parent said, "Why are you swearing at me?" And it turns out that one of the parents is swearing a lot. And, so they really have to, parents really have to monitor their own actions. Is the parent a complimentary parent? What did they say about other people? I mean,
Mm,
that's one thing I was
mm.
always appreciative of my parents is they really didn't badmouth anybody, except for Adolf Hitler, but that was, that was justifiable. But but they didn't really talk bad about other people. And so I learned that, and I don't do that. Um, so
And I get what you're saying there because
yeah,
we forget that they're watching everything. They need guidance. They crave boundaries, guidance, and all of that, even though your kid's, 11 and seems like they're independent. And as
yeah,
you're saying, this is one of your superpowers. You inspire us to think. So just like earlier, I'm thinking back now to one relative I had that would always talk about other people. And I had a view of some people based on that when I was a child. And as I got older, I realized, well, no, that's not the way it is or should be. But I internalized that for a few years as a
yeah,
child. And
right,
it just,
right,
they probably didn't even realize it. They were just shooting their mouth. But I remember it. We are role models.
right.
We
And they
forget.
also, parents also should comment on what they hear on TV or the news or the radio.
Mm,
If there are bad things said about other people, they need to say,
yeah.
that's not appropriate. We don't do that. Our values in this family, if we disagree with somebody, we can, say that we disagree. We don't feel the same way about that, but we don't have to call them jerks or stupid or
Yeah.
whatever. And,
Mm.
so I think the message here is that parents have a tremendous amount of power, but it takes a tremendous amount of energy and self-reflection and self-monitoring to be a good parent. And I don't want to have parents to feel like, oh, I'm just never going to be able. And we all make mistakes, but it's also important when parents even for building self-esteem in kids, if parents make a mistake, oh, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? You know, they could correct themselves and say, I made a mistake, but I'm going to try to figure out how to correct that.
Sure.
And, and the role model for kids is that we're all human beings. We all make mistakes and, but we can correct them. We don't have to beat ourselves up over them.
I guess two
So,
words that go with role model, those two words, be aware. Be aware of how you show up. Be intentional about it. Don't take it for granted because your kids are watching.
yeah,
Allan, thank you so much. Covered a lot today and all
yeah,
the
we
great
did.
stuff. Yeah, really good. I really appreciate it. Again, instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. Whether it's a question about your kids, doesn't matter what it is, even career questions. We'd love to field them here and looking forward next time we get together.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.